Our next Discover Historic New England program is happening on Thursday evening, November 17th. On Thursday evening, that's November 17th, we will be talking about the year 1620, the first year of contact. And I hope you enjoy my conversation with Christopher Daly, the historian who will be walking us through this program. This is a new program, Chris, yeah?
This is a new program. However, this is something that I've studied for years and years and years. I grew up in Pembroke, which is right, not literally, but next door to Plymouth, and grew up with that whole story of the Pilgrims and everything, and have had certain aspects of my life where I've had contact and work within, Plymouth Plantation, the Alden House, things like that.
Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering, this kind of goes back, was this one of the first things as growing up in that area? You are a historian, you teach history every day. Is this one of the first history stories that just kind of grabbed you as you were thinking about it?
Yes, it is. When I was young, I remember, really, I was very interested in the history of my town, which is very connected to Plymouth, because a lot of the settlers that came into Plymouth migrated into Pembroke. And early on, I wanted to join the Historical Society, and I went there. I must have been in like 8th grade or something, and I asked to join, and they said, "You're too young." So I waited a few years. I was in my 20s, and I was able to join. And they were like, "How would you like to be the president of the Historical Society?" I thought, wow.
I'm not surprised.
And then found out nobody else wanted to do it. So from that grew into my love of local history, connecting to Plymouth, the Native Americans, the early settlers. And that was really my first love, is local history. So I'm kind of going back to my roots with this.
The last one that you did here at the library was Sacco and Vanzetti, which was a fascinating local story as well, but a little more current.
Right. 100 years current.
Right.
That's another one that it all happened in our own backyard. And what drew me to that was I could go to Braintree and all these places. Vanzetti lived in Plymouth, and I was able to find his house and all that. So a lot of these...
And one of them lived here in Quincy, right, if I recall?
Yeah, the guard, Baradelli. Right before that, I did the lecture in Quincy. I found where he lived, and I actually went down to the house and everything.
Yeah.
I hadn't done that before, and I've been doing this Sacco Vanzetti thing for over 25 years almost, so...
That's one of the things I love about your programs, Chris, is you do go and you visit. I remember it was, I think, one of the first programs that I saw you do was all about the Kennedy assassination.
Yeah.
And going and looking at that on the ground. So what kind of on-the-ground research did you do for 1620? It looks probably different 400 years later.
A lot of the sites have markers and are still intact, oddly enough. And for years and years and years, I've been going and visiting these places, and I thought, wouldn't it be a great idea to put something together for the 400th that's kind of it's a tour of all these places, but it's also telling the story of the first year. And like my students, they think that the Pilgrims were the first people that settled America, actually, but a lot of people think that they landed in Plymouth. That was the first place, but no, it was actually on the tip of the Cape, P-Town, and that's where it starts. And you go all over the Cape, and there's markers everywhere. The first place they got fresh water is marked. The well is still there, the spring. Just things like that, where they got attacked by the Indians. All these places are marked out, and there's all these little stories that go with it as well. And it's just fascinating to think of how hard it was and that they survived, unlike some of these other attempts at colonies.
So tell me so this program is structured around these places, and then do you just structure it kind of chronologically from first contact out of P-Town and then kind of...
I always tend to do things chronologically. I'm not one of those historians that just jump around, and I need a good linear line pattern. And we start immediately with the voyage over. A little bit about how they got over some of the problems they had on the Mayflower, and then pulling up on the Cape. They actually were headed towards the Hudson River. And there's a story how they decided to turn around and head for the Cape because they almost ran aground off of Chatham. And then we we just get into the discussion of how they were looking for a place to settle. So they explored the Cape. There were 3 big explorations of the Cape. A lot of it was around P-Town, going into Truro. And I just traced those explorations. You can look at a modern map and say, okay, this is where they walked through. You know, see, here's Commercial Street. They probably went through that area, but Commercial Street wasn't there any. And up into the dunes, which weren't dunes back then, it was all forested. And it's kind of neat just talking about that in their encounters. They'd see the natives and they'd try to make contact with the natives. They found native villages. Maybe you've heard of Corn Hill, where they went into the village and they found seed corn, which was really their saving grace, because if they didn't take that seed corn, they wouldn't have survived the first year. However, we get into the discussion of that was the native seed corn for their next year. So what did they do for food? And we talk about that and how later on, you hear a lot about them stealing the natives' corn, but they did eventually repay them for that with seed corn a year later. So that's a big issue we talked about in the lecture too.
I wonder if, I assume it is part, we here in Quincy obviously have Squantum, which is named after Squanto, I believe. There's
a debate on that, whether it's named after Squanto or it's a derivation of the word squaw, which is supposed to be not a very nice word.
A derogatory term for Indigenous women.
Right.
Yeah. Well, so the Squanto party, did you look at his story some as you were doing this research too? Because he obviously had contact with people before 1620.
Right. He was, this is a big part on Squanto, about how he was kidnapped by early explorers, brought to England, learned English, and he, in fact, ended up assisting them, the Pilgrims, that first year. But what a lot of people don't know about Squanto was he tried to hijack the sachem ship from Massasoit. He had like ulterior motives for helping the Pilgrims, and that never comes out in the little storybooks that you read. And eventually he died a mysterious death. Yeah, he was, Massasoit wanted his head after he found out that Squanto had betrayed him. And actually William Bradford defended him, wouldn't hand him over. But then they were out on an exploration mission, and Squanto, oddly enough, got a bloody nose and died.
That is rather peculiar.
Yeah, he's buried someplace in Chatham. I think there's a golf course out there. I think I know where the body is. It's in around that area.
Wow.
Yeah. That's actually after 1620, so I don't get into that so much. I get into how Squanto helped them in the beginning, but maybe that'll be next year. We can do 1620 and beyond.
And I assume the whole, there's just so much history that goes since. And we had Miles Standish and his relationship with, and the people who came to Marymount, obviously later too, but some really interesting history there as well.
Yeah, really, I think maybe we should do something Wessagusset too, if you know about the Wessagusset colony. It was.
I don't know. What is that?
Oh, that's Weymouth, basically, where the Wessagusset area is on the coast. And after 1622, 1623, you got this new colony that was planted basically by the dregs of society from London. They were ill prepared. They ate up all their food really quickly. They started stealing from the natives, started meddling with their women. And the natives had it. They were going to take him out, and Plymouth. And by this time, Massasoit was very ill. And Edward Winslow, who was one of the Pilgrims, went out to help him and actually helped him come. He was on death's doorstep, cured him. And Massasoit said, guess what? The Indians over in Wessagusset are going to take both your colonies out. And what you need to do is you need to attack the top ones. And that's what Miles Standish did. He took 9 of his men with Hobbamock, who was a great warrior, and they went out and they really they found the 2 head of the Massachusetts tribe and just murdered them.
They murdered the Massachusetts people.
Oh, the 2, Pecksuot and Wittatomet. I'm going off on tangents here, but This is after 1620.
No.
And that was a preemptive strike because they knew they were about to be attacked by that whole tribe. Yeah. I'm not saying it's good. I'm not saying it's bad. That's what happened.
You're right.
And if they hadn't done that, they'd probably been wiped out. Not too much different from what happened in Virginia about a year earlier. Yeah.
Where did you read this history? I'm just curious. We should wrap this up and let people, really.
Yeah.
We should let people know there's a lot that we're not talking about.
I know we're talking about stuff that doesn't even have to do with the first year, really. We're talking about subsequent events.
Yeah.
There's a great book by Henry Adams, Massachusetts Stories, three episodes in Massachusetts history. And I think he's a grandson of John Quincy Adams, or a son, I forget. And he gives the first account, and there's many accounts after that of the Wessagusset incident. And then you have Morton over on Marymount too. That was another incident where they went over and they just kind of burned his place down and put him in chains because he was selling guns to the natives and they were dancing around the maypole and all this.
Right.
And you're talking about separatists who are basically the Puritans. Probably more fanatical than Puritans, actually. But that's subsequent events we're talking about here.
Well, we have future programs to do. This is good.
Right.
There's no shortage of history around here. Well, Chris, it's always a pleasure talking to you. I know we're going to have a great time when we talk about 1620. I know it can be sensitive. I was talking to some friends with some indigenous roots, and it always makes them a little uncomfortable, obviously, to talk about contact. So I'm glad that
it does. Yeah.
There's some respect for the people who lived here. That's really important that we come.
Right. I've talked to some native people of native descent, and they don't want to hear about Wessagusset. They don't want to hear about Marymount.
No.
The thing with 1620 is what I like about it. It was a short period of time where both groups really respected each other. They helped each other out. It was so short. It was 1623 is when Wessagusset happened. And after that, that was like the template for, everything up to, Sitting Bull and, the Indian Wars and everything. So
when we talk about making America great, we should go back to 1620 and last for about 2 years, 2.5 years.
Yeah. Where they were actually, there was some respect there for a short amount of time. And then you just had a flood of English in here, and it ended up with King Philip's War.
Right.
Many of the natives were shipped off as slaves and subjugated to, second, third class citizens.
I learned recently, we had a program just recently all about the history of Native Americans in New England. And I learned in that program that Massachusetts has the dubious honor of being the first state to constitutionalize and make legal slavery for the local indigenous people.
Right. They were enslaved. Consecutive with the African Americans too.
Yeah, and even before in some ways.
Right.
So, quite a history. A lot of stories, though.
Pretty deep. Yeah.
And it is, it's fascinating. I'm sure you're going to be bringing a lot of photos from travels and looking at it, so we can really kind of walk in these past shoes.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Chris.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Looking forward to it. I hope you've enjoyed my conversation just now with Christopher Daly, the historian who will be talking to us for our latest Discover Historic New England program. It's happening on Tuesday evening, November 17th, and it's all about the year 1620, the first year of contact. It will be starting at 7 o'clock and will be live on Zoom and on the library's YouTube and Facebook channels.